Do we have any requests today? I actually have one, but I forgot my paper, so my office assistant is bringing that up to me, and we'll go back to that. Seeing no further bill requests for introduction, we'll move on to a hearing for Senate Bill 22, and I would first turn to the reviser for an overview on Senate Bill 72, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 72 amends the qualifications of county appraisers. It requires appraisal courses for members of the State Board of Tax Appeals, and it also requires courses to be approved by the Real Estate Appraisal Board. Section 1 removes the residential evaluation specialists and the certified assessment evaluation designations of the International Association of Assessing Officers from the certification qualifications, which allow for a person to be appointed to the office of the county or district appraiser. The bill would also add that on and after July 1, 2022, all appraisal courses that qualify for and retain the registered mass appraiser designation shall be courses approved by the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. Section 2 allows the Director of Property Valuation to accept appraisal courses approved by the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board as alternative courses to courses conducted by the Director's Office in order to fulfill the requirements to retain eligibility to be a Kansas appraiser. And lastly, Section 3 would require that the course requirements enumerated in the statute for members of the State Board of Tax Appeals shall be courses approved by the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, we will move on to the fiscal note and would turn to Department of Revenue if they would like to address the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. I don't believe there's any impact to the two building funds. With that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. I noticed that. Just thought I'd give you a chance to see if there's any questions. Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. Committee, we will open up our proponent section for testimony on Senate Bill 72 and welcome first to committee Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Sorry, I'm texting my mom about kids' transportation after school. Make sure everything's okay here while we do this. Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 72 today. So you're going to hear several bills, property tax bills that have passed the Senate this year, but also it's important to note that Senate Bill 72 in a different form or different bill number passed the Senate by a vote of 29 to 11 last year before COVID shut down the session early. So what this is really intended to do is focus on appraiser qualification and standards that are followed, modifying what provisions are in statute will guide their education process, and really just in terms of just getting recognition. You'll notice, I think in the fourth paragraph of our testimony, would require appraisers to register their mass appraisal designation from PBD, and that county appraisers take coursework that our state appraisers licensing board approves for appraiser designations. That's important because it'll give a more nationally certified recognition to their status, or more license. It changes the designation or gives a more nationally recognized designation. Right now, the IAAO, it's been the center of some BOTA appointments, news articles over the last couple of weeks. Really, that is kind of a trade association versus the congressionally created office that recognizes appraisal standards that started at the federal level back in, I think it's the 70s or 80s. But ultimately, this is just a education requirement type of bill, changing who oversees that, and we are placing that under the Real Estate Appraisal Board. This was part of a comprehensive package last year. So last year, Senate Bill 13 got all of the major attention, but I think it was 13 bills Senator Tyson introduced. This was one of them. Some of those are in Senate Bill 119 that you're going to hear shortly. So with that, I'll close. That's pretty much the intent of what this bill does.
Committee, this is the only proponent show as a verbal proponent, so we will go ahead and open it up for questions. Are there any questions? Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Eric. Can you give me a 101 very quickly on the difference between, I was under the impression county appraisers do mass appraisals, and then you have other appraisers that do fee appraisals. I guess my question arises that now we're inserting the, what is it, the board, the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board?
Yes, sir.
To, do they get involved in mass appraisals today, or do they put together any kind of training requirements for mass appraisers?
I believe I have the answer to that question. I don't have it with me. And I think that was the intent is, yeah, having this under the Real Estate Appraisal Board is a better fit. And I think that was one of the reasons why. I will have to confirm that when I have my computer, and we'll gladly get back to the committee on that.
Okay, I had some question about whether they do it today, or are they equipped to go that direction that this bill dictates. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We also have some testimony from the Department of Revenue on neutral testimony. They might be able to address that specific question. Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Maybe I'd like to dial this down a little bit in training for the appraisers. I've had some problems and have had a couple of constituent problems of the field staff that are actually going out on the properties and making a determination as to the classification of that particular property. And a lot of times that results in an error that taxpayers have to pay for some time. And maybe you're not the person to ask this question of, but do we have anybody in the room that actually knows those field staff? Do they have to have any continuing education hours, or how are they trained, say, in a mid-sized county?
I will gladly punt that question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And we might have some, we have other testimony in the opponent section from people that might be a little more qualified to answer that directly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer that till then. Thank you.
Committee, are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Sure. Thank you.
Committee, I'll address your attention also to other written-only proponent testimony. And at this point, I would open up neutral testimony.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Alcala.
Yes, I apologize. Go ahead,
Oh,
John.
that's okay. I want to step back a couple of steps here to, I don't recall the lady's name that was talking about the fiscal note.
Kathleen Smith with Department of Revenue.
Yeah, I have a question for Kathleen. Kathleen, in the fiscal note, it mentions that the responsibility for approving these courses is going to be given to the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, but presently they don't offer such courses.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. I would ask that we refer this question to David Harper, the Director of Property Valuation Division. He could probably answer that. David, are you able to respond?
Yes, and I believe the question was on the fiscal note. The impact would be that there would be a fee submitted to the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board in order to get education offered that they don't currently offer. So PVD would have to fill out an application each year and submit a fee. I believe it's between $100 and $150 per year, and that would be the fiscal impact on us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, and it looks like we might also have a question from Representative Wassinger, virtual.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was already answered. I pulled my hand back down, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And at this point, we'll move on to neutral testimony and welcome to committee David Harper, Kansas Division of Property Valuation.
All right, thank you. Yes, I'm David Harper. I'm director for the Division of Property Valuation for the Kansas Department of Revenue. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you on this bill today. Senate Bill 72 really focuses on the Department of Revenue's and PVD's education program and our certification program for Kansas County appraisers. The bill does a couple things. It proposes a couple changes. Number one, it would amend KSA 19430. And 19430 sets the qualifications that one must meet in order to be appointed as a county appraiser by a county commission. And within those requirements, there's currently a requirement that an appraiser must hold one of 4 appraisal designations. And those designations are offered. One's offered by the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, which is a certified general property appraiser. And Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, yes, one of the questions earlier, their primary function is to certify and license appraisers primarily to do mortgage type appraisals, single property type appraisals, and the general certification is one of their designations. And we also have KDOR's Registered Mass Appraiser designation. This was a designation the Kansas Legislature created back in 1997. An attempt to get a designation focused specifically on the duties of the Kansas County appraisers. And then there's 2 designations that are recognized by the International Association of Assessing Officers, or IAAO, and these are appraisal theory designations that are offered by an agency that does offer education on mass appraisal techniques, property assessment, tools that are valuable to our appraisers. The bill would eliminate the recognition of the 2 IAAO designations from the statute. And as of today, this change would really not impact the number of appraisers we have qualified to serve as county appraisers across the state. Today, we have 212 appraisers on our approved list that rely on the RMA to qualify. We have 7 that rely on the general certification to qualify, and only 5 of those are currently active appraisers. And then we have 1 that relies on the IAAO designations to qualify to be appointed as a county appraiser, and that 1 is not an active county appraiser. I would make the argument that I think a valid argument could be made that the RMA should be the one requirement for Kansas County appraisers. The other designations are very highly respected in the appraisal profession. They show a great deal of expertise and experience by those that earn those designations, but they do not focus on Kansas property tax law like the RMA designation does. Again, the general certification, KREAB, they're governed by the Appraisal Foundation, the Appraisal Qualifications Boards. They're not governed by the laws of the property tax laws of the state of Kansas. And actually, one concern would be that currently someone who works only in a county appraiser's office, so as we're trying to develop younger appraisers to take over some of these positions, they would not be able to obtain the general certification, as KREAB only allows 25% of their total hours to come from mass appraisal experience. The other 2 changes deal with the education and the approval of the courses by moving that to the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. And what it would require is for those obtaining the RMA, all coursework would have to be on the KREAB approved list. For those just earning their continuing hours, all hours except for those offered by PBD would have to be on the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board's list. And I've had numerous conversations with the executive director of the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, and both of us think that we could take the steps to where our certification, our courses that are approved would remain exactly the same as they are today, or very similar. So that's primarily why I testified as a neutral today, because I think we would end up back at the same place we are today with the classes that are offered. Again, as I mentioned earlier, what it would require is all course providers to take an additional step by filling out an annual application, paying an annual fee of between $100 and $150 to get these courses approved. Just a couple items that probably just bring to your attention as possible concerns for maybe some unintended consequences. One of them is just future approval. We never know what's going to happen in the future. And again, our classes at PVD, we offer classes around 60, 70 classes a year for well over 1,000 students that really focus on the duties of a Kansas County appraiser. They talk about personal property, about oil and gas, exemptions, a lot of classes on our computer system, mass appraisal system. And all these courses are ones that really don't relate to what a fee appraiser does, what a private appraiser does for mortgage purposes. So I think there would always be the concern there that at some point these may not qualify for meeting the needs of KREAB and possibly not be qualified. One other thing that kind of struck me on the weekend I was concerned with is right now we have some flexibility on what we approve. A lot of appraisers will go to conferences like the Kansas Association of Counties, Kansas County Appraisers Association, and they'll have breakout sessions for the appraisers. As it stands currently, they can send us a summary of that breakout session and we can approve seminar hours for them. There's also different webinars, workshops that pop up throughout the year that we hope our appraisers attend. We had a number of those this year on the impact of COVID on commercial valuations. And my fear would be right now, or if this bill passed, possibly we would not be able to have the flexibility to approve those hours for our county appraisers, and they would have to pay to take additional courses. And then also just point out, I always want to be conscious of the cost. Right now, our annual dues is $25 for an RMA designation. That compares to about a range of, I think, 160 to about 230, 240 for one of the other licenses or designations. So we just want to always be cautious about additional costs that may have to be passed on to our county partners. So with that's a little bit of my summary of the bill. I'll be happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, David, thank you. I know you're neutral on this bill. That's what your testimony says, but do we really even need this bill?
Well, and I debated whether to, that's neutral because it's your decision, but that's kind of my take. And again, discussions with the executive director of the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, we were both wanting to make sure we hadn't missed something. But my take is, and I don't want to speak for her, but I think she agreed that we get back to the same place we are right now. We just have to go through some extra steps to get there.
Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you. One of the questions I have for you, what suggestions would you have to eliminate the problems of having so many taxes appealed and the backlog at the State Court of Appeals? And basically, it seems like it always ties back to appraisals. And do you have any suggestions of what kind of training that everybody could get on the same page so maybe we could eliminate some of these problems?
You know, and actually the number of appeals is the backlog is getting concerning. The number of appeals per year, we'd actually did an open records request with the Board of Tax Appeals and looked back, and we did this last year, so we had 2014 through 2018 data. And to me, it appeared that there was about 2,000 appeals a year that are either getting up to the small claims division or the regular division of the Board of Tax Appeals. So that's out of about 1.6, 1.7 million parcels that we have to value every year. One of the concerns is by the time you get 1 year settled at the Board of Tax Appeals, because of the backlog, you've already gone into the next year on appraisal, so you never seem to get a resolution for the property owners. One thing I'd mention, I think this bill is driven by some concerns from some of the larger retail property owners who are tied up in some appeal cases with the counties. But that's a pretty small portion of our parcels in the state. It probably makes up about 0.5%, and I'm not downplaying their concerns, but I would think if the concern is with the commercial valuations, maybe we could do something more specific to that, as possibly the requirements of appraisers on commercial and income producing property education, as opposed to doing more of a broader change that could have maybe some unintended consequences for our overall program.
It may not seem much, but if you're a commercial operator and your taxes double or triple, and you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, it may be only one or two people, but for those business people, it could be life or death. So it's not as insignificant to them as it might be to you.
Oh, and I if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry if it came across as I think I said it's that we take those appeals very seriously, and I don't mean it's insignificant to the property owners. I just meant it's wanting to be cautious about a change for the whole education system that's being driven by a smaller number of parcels, and possibly through our rules and regs, or be happy to discuss with these property owners where they think we're lacking, but maybe we could focus on the training on the commercial appraisals that seems to be driving this concern, and it's a very valid concern. So I'm sorry if it came across as I was downplaying that. That was not my intention at all.
Next question is Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks for your testimony and explanation. I guess as I listen to it, I wonder I'm going to have to get my acronyms right here. The IAAO seems to offer mass education, mass appraisal education, yet we're dropping them from the list. Is that because their education curriculum conflicts with Kansas law and therefore we want to draw back?
I don't know if it's been determined yet it conflicts with Kansas law, but it's been a different opinion than what some of the appraisers representing the property owners have presented. So we kind of have a battle of appraisal experts going on some of these large retail properties.
So that's behind this dropping them off the list. And my next question, if I can, is there, since they're under the purview of your department, is there any, I guess, performance review criteria for county appraisers?
Yes, there's a fairly extensive review process, both on procedural, whether they meet the statutory requirements, and then also on performance. And I believe just probably last week, Mr. Chairman, we delivered a preliminary sales ratio report and to your office. And what that does, it compares what property sold for the 12 months following the appraisal date. So we appraise property January 1 of next year. Then we evaluate properties that sell for the next 12 months and compare that to what they sold for, compare that to what they actually were appraised for. And that's kind of the report card on our county appraisers, and be happy, to come in and go over that with you in more detail as time permitted, if that would be helpful. But we do that extensive sales ratio report every year that judges how accurate the values are.
Okay, and I asked that just because it seems like the ultimate test of whether your training is adequate or not is the job that the folks do in the real world out there. So anyway, thank you for your reply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Correct. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I would just add, we had the question earlier about the training of staff, and our only requirements right now that deal with training deals with the training of the county appraisers and the qualifications of the county appraisers. Each county is responsible for their own training, but of their staff, but we do pick up a large portion of that by providing those courses on data collection and on our computer system, mass appraisal system, and other things, but ultimately it's the county appraiser's responsibility to train their staff.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Director.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yes, Representative Wassinger.
thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. My question is that one of the problems we've been having and we're trying to address in the regulatory area is it's so hard to become an appraiser. So why would we eliminate another avenue for someone to become an appraiser when the Kansas Real Estate Board doesn't have them set up yet because they're fee appraisers, not mass appraisers? So I'm a little confused as to why we would try to make it more difficult.
Director Harper, do you want to address that question?
Well, I could, and then maybe the proponent, maybe that's more question for them as well. But I don't know if it makes them, I don't know if it narrows the pool. Like I mentioned, over 90%, probably 95% of the appraisers who are now on our list qualified to be appointed as a county appraiser are relying on our designation, and that doesn't change by that removing those IAO designations. But I don't know if that answered your question, but I do feel strongly that the RMA is the most obtainable, most affordable designation out of the designations on that list, and that's one we want to continue to make available for our county appraisers.
Mr. Chairman, this is John
Yes.
Alfla. This is John
Yes,
Alfla. I
go
do
ahead,
have a comment. I have a comment for the representative's question, and my thought around it was that it was in the fiscal note when they were, where it mentioned about the responsibility for approving these courses, and it was going to give the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board the authority, even though they don't offer these courses. And then the gentleman right here just spoke about several big box stores that were in appeal processes for taxes. So I'm trying to put this puzzle together and I'm trying to understand it. But it seems to me that would put them in line for tax breaks, and then the net would be passed on to the taxpayers that are in the county. I mean, that's what I'm summarizing, that maybe this isn't a very good bill like it appears to be. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Did you wish to have a response to that or just comment?
That was she asked a good question. That was my understanding of what I'm seeing. I could be wrong, but it sure does fall in line like that. No response.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to appear neutral on Senate Bill 72? Seeing none, we will move on to the opponent testimony and welcome first to committee Sean, is it Robertson or Roberson with the Kansas County Appraisers Association? Robertson, welcome to committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Sean Robertson on behalf of the Kansas County Appraisers Association. I am president of that association, and just a full disclosure, I am on the board of directors of the acronym is NACRO. It's an 11-state North Central region affiliate of IAAO. Just wanted to begin, and with this may go back to some questions that have already been answered or asked anyway. The first thing proposed in this bill, as was talked about, was the removal of two of the designations from IAAO as a pathway to be a county appraiser. Currently, there are only 79 people who are county appraisers in the 105 counties. That's partially due to a shortage of qualified appraisers. And I know a number of you on this committee, your county appraiser in your home county is being shared with some other county. So eliminating 2 of the 4 designations as a pathway to be a county appraiser will only exacerbate that problem. Secondly, requiring education for the RMA from PVD be approved by the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. Go back to some of the things that Director Harper said. Currently, the Real Estate Appraisal Board has little or no education provided for personal property valuation, oil and gas valuation, exemptions, Kansas property tax law, ratio studies, or office administration, which are all part of being a qualified Kansas County appraiser. Those are simply not offered by the KREAP. It doesn't matter what profession it is. I hope that everyone would agree that the education for a designation or a license needs to be approved by the entity granting the designation. Bear with me on this analogy, but so say someone goes and gets their hair and nails done and didn't like how it turned out. So would it ever be appropriate legislatively to then say that license from the Kansas Board of Cosmetology now needs to be approved by the Barber's Examiner Board? There might be some underlying similarities, but they really aren't the same thing. I think in order to look at the county appraiser's grade, for lack of a better term, and the education they're receiving, we need to look at statewide, the big picture of what the values were compared to what the sale prices were. We're not talking about this one time, this one property in this one place. We're talking about statewide. Pull back and look at the big picture. I would refer you to my notes in my written testimony from the last 5 years. Statewide, the commercial ratio of value to sale price has hovered in the low 90s for commercial properties, and for residential properties, mid 90s. But I'd have you take a look at that, which means we are doing an impeccable job. That does not mean that every single parcel and every single appraiser and every single field person in an appraisal office has done everything correctly, but in the big picture, we're on the right track, and that is absolutely due in no small part to the education that we're receiving and the designations that it takes to get to be an appraiser. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Committee, we do have several opponents, so we will take questions at the end of opponent testimony.
Right.
Our next conferee is Greg McHenry on behalf of Larry Clark, the International Association of Assessing Officers. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. I'm Greg McHenry. I'm the Riley County Appraiser. I'm also, for 1 year, the president of IAAO on a volunteer basis. I'm here to fill in for Larry Clark, who's home battling pneumonia, so I apologize that he couldn't make it. I'm going to try to cover the main points that he put in his written testimony and maybe give you a few perspectives of my own as well. IAAO was formed in 1934 by 5 men and 1 woman. They felt very strongly at the time that mass appraisers, or assessors as they're known in other states, needed to have a set of standards to follow, guidelines to assure their constituents that what they were doing was done correctly using mass appraisal best practices and also under a code of ethics. And that has been the case ever since. What was a national organization eventually became the International Association of Assessing Officers, or IAAO as we refer to it in our industry. IAAO was then and remains one of the founding members of the Appraisal Foundation. The Appraisal Foundation is the basically big umbrella that all appraisal organizations throughout the country fit under. And their main goal, main function is really to provide standards for all of us in the appraisal industry. So the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, or uspap as we call it, is our Bible that we follow to ensure that what we do meets the correct standards. And I know one of the implications from some of the proponents of this bill was that maybe in the mass appraisal side, we are not, through IAAO's influence, we are not following state statutes. And I'll just read you a portion of Canon 1 of our Code of Ethics and Standards. It says, "It is unethical for members to knowingly violate applicable laws and regulations in the performance of their duties or to apply such laws and regulations in an inequitable manner." It states very clearly in our ethics at IAAO, and basically that's an extension of uspap, that we do need to follow our local, statewide in this instance, laws and regulations. That would be a violation of our Code of Ethics if we did not do that. IAAO is the only mass appraisal organization in the world at this point. We take great pride in trying to make sure that because of that, we offer best practices, the best educational programs, and professional development programs, designations. I believe that is why in Kansas we have been recognized as having one of the best property tax systems, one of the most fair and equitable systems, because we are mandated to follow some of these IAAO standards, including the ratio study that was talked about earlier, as well as all the other work that we do in mass appraisal. Putting us under KREB is not a good fit. Just like if KREB was forced to be put under property valuation division's oversight, that would not be a good fit. In both cases, we're appraisers. In both cases, we are trained to understand and learn and use the cost approach, the income approach, the sales comparison approach. But in both cases, the scope of our work is completely different. I have a young son who's working on his MAI as a commercial fee appraiser. He would tell you that his training is very specific towards single property appraisal and mostly for purposes of lending. And in my case, my training is using those same three approaches to value to be able to value all of our properties in our county January 1st of every year. That's a lot different than single property appraisal. The courses that IAAO offers and the courses that Property Valuation Division offers are targeted and geared towards making sure that we can do our job differently than those in the fee appraisal world, but do it specific to the mass appraisal issues that we face. And you know, KREB does a great job with their programs. They're more expensive. They're going to be $1,200 to $1,500 per course. The courses that Property Valuation Division and IAAO offer are in the $250 to $350 range. So while that's not a fiscal note influence to the state, it definitely is to every county, as not only would we need those courses to be certified, get our designation or license, we would also need to continue to take those courses as continuing ed as long as we're in the career. I think it would be a fair statement to say that putting this under KREB would be kind of an apples and oranges situation. There's no need for this bill. We currently have a great program of education that's specific to mass appraisal, just like KREB has great programs specific to single property appraisal. And I hope that the committee will take a step back and see the lack of a need for this bill, and also ask us any questions that you might have that have been driving this bill. I personally don't understand why we're why we're here today, why we're talking about this, as I think both KREB and IAAO and PVD have a great plan in place and do a great job for their scope of work. But we need to make sure and be very clear that the scope of work is very, very different between the two organizations. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your testimony. Our last opponent conferee is Brad Eldridge, real estate appraiser. Brad, are you with us? Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chair. I appear today as a citizen of Lawrence, Kansas. Also offering a perspective as a real appraiser who has gone through the education process and professional development process through the private sector. We talked about single property earlier today. I now practice mass appraisal at a Kansas County. And so I just wanted to kind of give you some perspective on that. I really have three things I do want to share with you, is just showing a little bit difference between my experiences going through the education development process as a real estate appraiser through KREB and then also through IAAO. Two different things from my experience. Second thing I want to show is just also talk a little bit about some facts about IAAO education, just to make sure I understand a little bit about that. Full disclosure, I am also an IAAO instructor. I am passionate about education and professional development. That's why I'm here today. The third thing I want to talk about is just giving a little bit of a fact check about the IAAO white paper that seems to be a little bit of a point of contention, and I just have a few things that I'll share with you on that. But, you know, in terms of my background, I started in real estate appraisal in 1998, and in 3 years I got my certification. It takes 3 years at a minimum to get a general certified license from KREB. After that, I decided I wanted to commit further into my appraisal career, and so I went through the Appraisal Institute. And I went through the MAI designation program and took another series of coursework. It took me a total of 5 years after that. And so I really immersed myself in single property appraisal. I did have the opportunity to move into the mass appraisal sector in 2009, and so I switched gears. Decided to, instead of work 80 hours a week, to maybe ratchet it down and have 40-hour weeks and spend more time with my family. And as a result, I thought, you know, I could go to the county and I'd be like, this would be turnkey. This is going to be easy, right? It was not. I found out quickly that my 8 or 11 years in training and doing single property appraisal did not set me up for taking care of work at the county. And so I asked around, asked my compatriots in the private sector and the other counties who had kind of mentored me along the way too, and they said, you need to go to IAAO. These are guys that have the coursework on mass appraisal on what you need to do. And so I took the next step, quickly went through all their process, and found out that there was a whole other set of tools and strategies that I needed to learn in order to do my job at the county. And so through IAAO, I was able to learn several things there, and most importantly, some of the ethical guidelines and things in engaging with the public, and making sure that we have checks of quality control, and also checks of accuracy. And I learned that through the IAAO coursework. And as I continued through that, you know, I had a goal at some point to become an instructor, and so now I am active doing that. I burn vacation time from the county to go do that a few times a year, but I just recently taught IAAO Course 400, and it's a course that every time I teach it, I really enjoy getting back into it because it has to do with assessment administration. And so it's basically a management class, and if you think about, or if you know some of the county appraisers, we're not all fortunate enough to go to college and take management courseworks and things like that. And so with IAAO 400, it gives you the tools and strategies to help operate an office, you know, the hiring practices, you know, how to deal with staffing issues. One of the big issues that we have in county appraisals, I've got 40,000 parcels to go out and visit in 1 year. How am I going to do that? How much staff am I going to need? Do I need to hire more staff? Things like that. And so it's a very practical course, and it's one of those things that is unlike anything I took from any other appraisal education provider in my background on that. And so I just wanted to share a little bit with that. And briefly, I don't know if you guys had a chance or if you even know what this white paper debacle is. About 13 pages of really riveting reading there. I know there's a lot of basketball games going over the weekend, but during your breaks, you could have read this. I am just going to go over it with you briefly. You know, it's basically looking at the concept of fee simple property rights. You already checked out, right? As soon as I said fee simple property rights. But what it is it basically goes through pages of legal definitions. There's 36 citations of different appraisal texts and legal definitions. And, it basically just talks about, there needs to be further discussion on the topic. That's how it starts and how it ends. On the end, it says, none of this, 13 pages of information. There's a couple of suggestions in there, but it says none of this is to say that appraisers can ignore statutory or judicial interpretations of fee simple or any other concept. And so in the paper itself, that seems to be a very controversial issue. It says in itself not to ignore state law. If you also look through that, there's no references to Kansas or refuting Kansas law. And so it's an opinion paper. It's a white paper. Every professional organization has folks that put together white papers. I think we've got different opinions of this white paper. And if you're familiar with the definition of real estate appraisal, it's an opinion of value. So basically, we've got differing of opinions about opinions on opinions of value. And so I just wanted to leave you with that. And I appreciate your time for letting me be here today.
Thank you, committee. We will now open it up for questions. Are there any, do we have another conferee? Okay. Go ahead and step up to the microphone, please. Okay, we have yours as written testimony. You can go ahead and approach the microphone.
Sorry about that. My name is Tricia McDowell, and I'm here to present oral testimony against Senate Bill 72. I believe it is a mismatch of roles, knowledge, and standards, and I would ask that the bill be rejected. It's important for me to state right up front that my testimony is my own beliefs and comments and thoughts are my own. They may not represent the thoughts of the organizations I belong to or am on the board of, and I'll get to that in a minute and you'll see why. I was a fee appraiser, sometimes referred as a single property appraiser, for 29 years. The last 6 years I've been a mass appraiser, so I go on both sides of the appraisal. Professionalism has always been important to me in my career as an appraiser. From the Appraisal Institute, I hold the SRA and MAI designation, and I'm currently vice president on our local chapter board. From the IAAO, I have the CAE designation, and I just finished being second vice president on that local chapter board. I also hold my general state certification from the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, and I'm also on that board. And I will say that I'm on the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board not because of my mass appraisal experience, it's because of my fee appraisal experience. It's unusual that they even have someone with mass appraisal on the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. In addition to my testimony, I've attached my qualifications and examples of the coursework that I've taken through these organizations and PVD. What you can see from that list on the course names is that the upper level IAAO courses include a lot of modeling courses along with administration. These are courses that the Kansas Real Estate, that institutes like the Appraisal Institute do not have any of these type of courses. I would like the committee to understand that mass appraisal and fee appraisal have some commonalities, but the difference in technology and methodology are significant. A commercial fee appraiser might do 40 to 70 appraisals a year, depending upon the complexity of the property. At Sedgwick County, we value over 14,000 commercial properties in the span of 2 months. Obviously, it takes a different set of knowledge, standards, and courses to be able to do that. Both types of appraisers are regulated under the Uniform Standards Professional Appraisal Practice. I think that's been mentioned. It's called uspap. It was in the late 1980s that the Appraisal Foundation came up with the standards in uspap. I don't think it's been mentioned, but in uspap, the Appraisal Foundation recognizes the difference between fee appraisers and mass appraisers. So fee appraisers are under standards 1 and 2, review is standards 3, and mass appraisers are under 5 and 6. And I think that's really important. I'll get to that in a minute. The Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board was created from the savings and loan crisis in the 1980s to protect the public and lenders from bad appraisal. The Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board is designed to educate, monitor, and discipline fee appraisers who do fee appraisals or single property appraisals for federally related transactions like banks. We are a small board. There's only 4 fee appraisers on here, and even within the fee appraisers, we have to cover the varying disciplines, which in this case is rural, commercial, and residential fee appraisal. While the lower level IAAO classes have been approved through Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board, they deal with single property appraisal. The board is not equipped to understand, let alone approve, the upper level courses of IAAO, which deal with modeling and assessment administration. Again, this board is not familiar with standards 5 and 6 of uspap, which guide mass appraisers. Rather, the courses are approved using standards 1 and 2 of uspap. I would request that the committee reject having the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board remove all the IAAO courses. I believe that this function is better served by keeping this within PVD or an entity who understands mass appraisal techniques. I would also request that this committee reject removing the CAE and RES designation from being appointed as a county appraiser. These designations demonstrate that the appraiser are part of a well-respected mass appraisal organization and went over and beyond what was required to be a mass appraiser. The same can be said for having an MAI and SRA designation Appraisal Institute versus having a certification or a license from Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. Professionalism should be encouraged at all levels, and it does not appear that this bill promotes professionalism for fee or mass appraisers. Thank you for letting me testify.
Thank you, and at this time, we will take questions. Committee, are there any questions for the opponents? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would be for any of the opponents or all of them if they care to answer. So whether it's mass appraisals or fee appraisals or whatever, I've often contended that the value of a piece of property is what somebody else is willing to pay for it on the open market. Is that one of the standards that's taught in any of these courses?
I would welcome any of the opponents to step to the microphone if they wish to address the question.
Appraisal is very complex, but yes, that is for both levels, really that's the whole goal driving it, is you want to get to the value of what the property will sell for. Fee appraisal is a little different than mass appraisal because fee appraisers value different types of ownership, for example, and interest in real estate. So for example, a fee appraisal may come up with several different values, like a leased fee value, a fee simple value, a value as if vacant, a value as if proposed. Mass appraisers just do a fee simple value. But the whole goal, which is through our ratio studies, which measures how we've appraised value versus what they sell, that is our ultimate goal in every case, is to be as close as possible to what that property is selling for, because that's how we're going to be graded on it.
If I may continue, Mr. Chairman. So I don't quite get that or understand that. A piece of property is worth what somebody else will pay for it, not what anybody thinks that it'll sell for.
Sorry, what was the question?
So you don't believe that the value of a piece of property is what somebody else will pay for it? You're trying to figure out what you think it'll sell for, is that correct?
We try and value property based on what we sell for. There's both fee appraisers and mass appraisers use 3 approaches to value, but the methodology different. But basically, for both sets of appraisers, there's 3 approaches to value: the cost, the income, and the sales. The sales involves similar types of property that are being sold, and that at the county and at the fee appraisal, we use all 3 approaches to value. So we are looking at what a property would sell for.
Okay, and then I've got one other question, and this might be best for Mr. Robertson. Thank you. So, Mr. Robertson, if you could tell me again, how many, did I understand you to say that there were something like 74 appraisers in the state of Kansas, county appraisers, or did you use that number?
79.
79, okay, thank you. And so I've got this map here that says there are 226 eligible appraisers. Do you know what this is about?
Yes, I do.
Could you
I know
explain that
the
to
number
me?
was somewhere in the order of 200. 226 sounds about right. That is the number of appraisers that hold these qualifications and are on the eligibility list. I will say that many of those are in, obviously, the more populated counties and in eastern Kansas, and where this has become a problem is especially the western two-thirds of the state, is there may be a couple of hundred people qualified, but it's really difficult to get any of those to come out to western Kansas.
Okay, so was it also your testimony that this bill would make it more difficult to find appraisers?
Yes, absolutely it would. When you cut the number of possible designations in order to be an appraiser in half, that certainly doesn't mean that the number of qualified people will be cut in half. I don't know the breakout of those numbers, but if you cut the possible ways to become appraiser in half, it would absolutely exacerbate that problem.
Okay, but it seems that there's a problem already.
Yes, but the solution is not to make it worse.
So what is the solution?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Corbett.
Just stay there if you would.
Yes, sir.
So, you're having trouble getting appraisers in all your counties. How would you feel about your appraisers being elected? And you know you'd have one in each county.
Here's the problem with that. If you did away with the qualifications and simply had anyone get elected, you would have no qualifications, no experience, no education. You would have appraisers, quite possibly, that know nothing about it. If you kept those qualifications in place, we have estimated that there are about 40 counties that wouldn't have anyone eligible to run for the office.
Thank you. And just one other comment that you made earlier. The difference between getting your hair done and paying your taxes, you don't have to get your hair done. If you get my taxes the same as my haircut, you're my man.
Next question is Representative Blex.
Thank you. While Mr. Robertson's there, I'll take advantage of having county appraisers here and ratchet that down again and basically look at field staff, which may be a solution to some of the mass numbers of appeals. It may not, but there seems to be a lot of error there. So could you enlighten me as to how much training that, I'm assuming each individual appraiser is responsible for training that field staff, but is there any continuing education, or how much training can you kind of give me maybe in your own county?
Right. As Director Harper said, it's up to each individual county and county appraiser. We do require IAAO Course 1 and Course 2, which are the basics of appraisal, in order to stay on the job. Actually, they have to pass those in the first 6 months as a condition of employment. That is not the case, as was testified earlier, but I think it is a good idea to somehow come up with a statewide way of educating or requiring education for those field people. I know that a lot of counties that isn't the case, and that would be a first step, I believe, in possibly getting more accurate information about properties in the first place before it got to an appeal level.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for any of the opponents? Seeing none in the room, and I'll double check online. I do not see any virtually. We will close the hearing on Senate Bill 72 and move on to open the hearing on Senate Bill 98. And I would first turn to the reviser for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 98 provides for the standard of evidence required from a BODA appeal. It extends the time allowed for a former member to serve. It also provides for the appointment of a pro tem member. Section 1 of the bill of Senate Bill 98 would provide that for taxpayer that appeals a decision of BODA to the district court, and the appeal would be based on determination of valuation of real property. The county appraiser is required to produce evidence of the validity and the correctness of such valuation. Section 2 of the bill would extend the time period a member of the board may continue to serve after the expiration of the term. Currently in statute, it's 90 days, and this bill would extend that to 180 days. Secondarily, the bill provides that the governor would be allowed to appoint a former member of BODA as a member of pro tempore of the board for a period of time not to exceed 1 year. And this would be in the case of after having exercised due diligence, a vacancy on the board still exists. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you for that overview. And I would turn to the fiscal note if Department of Revenue wishes to address the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. I believe there is no impact to the state building funds on this bill.
Thank you once again. Committee, do we have any questions on fiscal note? Seeing none, we will open up proponent testimony on Senate Bill 98 and welcome to committee Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber to speak in support of Senate Bill 98. I was hoping Randy would go first and we'd be us too, and this actually came as a issue arising from their membership, I believe. He'll probably speak to, but essentially the purpose of Senate Bill 98 is to codify a case law. Back in 2014, I believe it was, the legislature passed a bill changing some provisions dealing with the Board of Tax Appeals. And one of those changes that the legislature approved unanimously in that bill was that if a taxpayer appeals to BODA and they don't believe that they had the satisfactory hearing at BODA, they can either continue on appeal with the case from BODA to the Court of Appeals, or they can appeal trial de novo to the district court and essentially have a brand new trial start over where everything goes back in to the record. So we're speaking for the second part there, where the taxpayer appeals trial de novo to the district court. This is just codifying case law that says the burden of proof is on the county to show that their valuation is correct. That it's not, the appeal isn't on the taxpayer to show that the taxpayer's valuation is right. The burden, the county carries the burden. So that is the purpose of this bill, and happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stuckey, are you verbal testimony on this bill as well?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I was testifying before a different committee just now, so I didn't think I was going to be able to be here today, but okay. I appreciate if I have the opportunity.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This has been a rough day for me. I opened my emails this morning to no less than 5 very upset emails from my members, Renew Kansas Biofuel Association and Grain and Feed Association members that have received their valuations, their property valuations this year. So here goes again, another round of very large, almost inexplicable increases in valuations. Suffice to say, these valuations will be appealed, and as they are in most years. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate we are on this merry-go-round to go every year to go through this appeal process. But that's the heart of this bill, Senate Bill 98, is we put pen to paper a couple years ago. Well, last year it was heard and almost was passed out. But Senate Bill 98 would ensure that the taxpayer, the commercial taxpayer, the property taxpayer, when they appeal from the Board of Tax Appeals, under this new right to a new hearing on the facts before a district court, which was put in place I believe, in 2016. You might receive a testimony on the other side of this issue saying that this is an appeal, and as an appeal, the burden should shift to the party that lost the underlying hearing. Well, be careful there. I urge you to be careful with that. This is not an appeal on the record, on the cold record, to an appeal body. This is, in fact, a new hearing to a new trier of fact in evidence. This is the district court. It's a new hearing. For that reason, that burden of proof, the burden of proof that the county holds before the Board of Tax Appeals should remain with the county before this new trier of fact. That's the whole part and parcel of this bill. It makes sense. It's good policy. It's better than the alternative. And the purpose for bringing this to you today is that it is in statute today that the burden of proof lies with the county before the Board of Tax Appeals. It's been argued successfully that this should extend to this new right to a district court hearing that was just passed by the legislative body in, I believe, 2016. And we would want that put in statute so that there was no question about who has that burden of proof under this new trial of fact on the facts at the district court level. If the property owner, taxpayer, loses at the district court and then appeals on the cold record before the Court of Appeals, we would agree that the burden of proof should shift then to whomever is appealing that decision. But at this stage, it's a trial on the facts, and it should rest with the county. Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions, but that's basically our testimony.
Thank you, Randy. Committee will go ahead and open it up for questions for the proponents. Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So currently, you're saying that if I go to the BOTA and I lose, now I have the opportunity to go to the district court. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But in current practice, the burden of proof is on me at that point, and we want to change it to make it.
Well, we're not going to change it. It's unclear. Now, we've held hearings, we've appealed, we've had these new hearings before the district court. We've argued in our presentation that the county should have the burden of proof, and that's been accepted, but that may not be accepted by a different district court judge. We want to make sure that that sound policy is put in statute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Stuckey, I am sure that there are a myriad of reasons why people appeal, but are there one or two kind of general reasons why people think that their property is being unfairly valued?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had the pleasure in recent years of both the Senate and House tax committees holding hearings specifically for our members, the Kansas grain industry, because the valuation increases were so outrageous, 500%, 1,000% year over year. And even still, this year this morning, I've seen valuation increases that are just inexplicable, 100% increases. And if you can't informally resolve that through the informal process with your county appraiser, then your hands are tied. You can't just pay that bill. You have to fight for your bottom line. And that's what brings us to the Board of Tax Appeals and sometimes to the district court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Randy. Most people don't realize if you're a business and you want to appeal, you have to write a check to start the appeal. And sometimes it's not a small check. I think this bill does one thing very well. It makes the county put a little skin in the game, make them show just why we're there today. I think that it should settle a lot of problems if we ever get in statute, but it is a big problem because every county's a little different. I think it's a good start.
Well, you're exactly right, Representative. This is not an inexpensive process. This requires the property taxpayer to hire counsel and go through the very expensive process of both the BOTA hearing and a hearing before the district court. And if we can resolve these, that's certainly to the the benefit of all parties involved.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was the point that I wanted to make sure everybody understood. When you go to district court, you have to retain legal counsel, and that meter starts spinning real heavy. So the county, of course, doesn't have that with their appraiser. They don't have that cost because they've already got staff that does that. It's on the burden of the taxpayer that he's one having to write a really big check. That's a very discouraging process. The burden of proof should not change. It should stay with the county. Thank you.
Next question is Representative Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to clarify if I'm going to appeal this is mostly on large, like business owners. Is it mostly commercial?
Well, my members would be commercial, but it could be a residential
as well.
Property owner as well.
If I'm going to appeal, I'm going to have my documentation of what it is that I'm basing my appeal on. So I already have that information. Just personally, going from residential, I have appealed in the past. I won my appeal. I haven't had to do it again, but I had documentation that I took with me, and so I had that burden. I had that proof with me, and I would assume that the same thing would happen from both sides, heading to higher and higher levels. That we would have that same proof with us. So I guess I'm just misunderstanding why we need this legislation if as we move higher and higher up in the appeal process, won't we already have that documentation, that proof with us? No?
Well, this bill doesn't require any additional documentation. It states that who has the burden of proof on the valuation.
Okay.
And the burden of proof means that the county appraiser then has to present the evidence and prove their valuation. It's not up to the taxpayer to disprove the valuation.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Are they coming to court without that?
Sure, I guess I don't understand the question. Certainly they have their documentation, but the burden of proof is just who has to present the standard of evidence that is more probable than not to support the valuation. It's not a physical documentation. It's just.
I understand the burden of proof, and what I'm saying is, you have to support that, why it is that you're going into court, and it's if I'm going to appeal as the taxpayer, okay, I'm the one who needs to prove my case.
Well, that's not the current law in the state of Kansas.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Committee, I'll also address your attention to written-only proponent testimony on Senate Bill 98 in your folder, and we will move on to neutral testimony, and I'd like to welcome to committee Bruce Chladney, testifying on behalf of the Kansas Association of Counties. I believe he's joining us virtually.
That's right. Thank you, Chairman Smith. And actually, what I would like to do, if that's okay with you, is respectfully turn this over to Jay Hall, who was in fact able to join us. He originally was tied up in some other committee meetings, but he has now since been able to join us. And so I would like for him to join us and share with you all the testimony that he has written in front of you.
Certainly, we appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Yes, and thank you, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. Jay Hall for the Kansas Association of Counties. I'll be brief with my comments in recognition of the time. The main thing that I want to focus on is the fact that the county cannot bring the action at the district court level. Only the taxpayer may appeal to the district court level. Kansas law, as it is currently written, says only the taxpayer may appeal from BOTA to the district court level, pardon me. And so that means that because only the taxpayer can appeal to the district court level, it puts the county in the position of having to obviously, they can be hauled into court essentially at the district court level and still have that burden of proof, even though they cannot appeal to that level. And so that's really where we come from at the KAC, with just kind of questioning whether this particular bill is necessary, because of the fact that the county, under law, cannot bring that action at the district court level. Obviously, it's in everybody's best interest to be able to settle these things before it gets to that point. But I mean, the county is going to be involved in this either way, whether it goes to the district court level or whether it goes to the appellate court level. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
So just to clarify, Mr. Hall, though, the KAC is neutral on this policy?
Yeah, we are neutral on the bill overall for a couple of reasons. The bill actually touches on a couple of different topics. One of them is the term for BOTA members, and we support that particular provision to allow BOTA members to serve for up to 180 days after their term has expired. So we support that particular provision. We are not against this other provision, but we do question the necessity of it.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for our neutral conferee? Seeing none, Mr. Hall, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And committee, we have one opponent showing Sean Robertson with Kansas County Appraisers Association. Welcome back to the podium.
Chairman, members of the committee, Sean Robertson for Kansas County Appraisers Association. Want to be clear that the Kansas County Appraisers are not opposed to bearing the burden of proof in any case. In fact, we have documentation of how we arrived at a value even for every single property, regardless of whether it's under appeal or not. In the beginning, at the informal level, at the small claims level, at the Board of Tax Appeals, and at district court. This is more of a judicial procedural question than valuation and taxation. It is simply the fact, as Mr. Hall said, the county is statutorily prohibited from bringing the action, but then would have the burden of proof put upon them, and as far as I know, that is certainly not common and possibly even unheard of in the judiciary. I don't want to echo Mr. Hall too much, but that's what I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Okay, we don't have any other opponents, so we will open up to questions, and Chair would recognize Representative Corbett.
So if this bill passed, it could work out just like it's saying, that they could all meet at district court, and the proof would be on the county, correct?
Yes.
And the thing that comes to my attention here is they're appealing. It's kind of like a crime scene. If the taxpayer thinks that you've charged them with a crime that's not fit or fair, I think the court would be a good place to try to settle the problem and let the county actually put some skin in the game instead of just letting the taxpayer pay for your salary and all the other attorneys that are fighting the tax. I mean, I think it's a fair bill. I don't see why if you guys think your appraisal is perfect, let's hear it in court and let them decide.
Is there a question, Representative, or just a comment? Okay. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we heard testimony from the one of the proponents that valuations are sometimes 500% to 1,000% higher. Is that your experience, that happens a little bit, hardly ever, some, a lot?
Certainly not to that extent, but it is possible under certain circumstances.
So, I mean, just as a regular guy, how does something go up in value 500 to 1,000% in 1 year?
The number one reason that can happen is new construction on a property.
So, are there any other examples of when something like that could happen?
Off the top of my head, no, but I would have to look at each individual property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of Senate Bill 98? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 98 and move on to opening the hearing on Senate Bill 119. And I would turn to the revisor's office for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 119 would provide for a hearing for appraisers removed from the list of eligible appraisers, and also notation on an appraiser who does not complete a 4-year term. The bill would extend the time period for when a complete opinion is requested from BOTA. It would also allow for service by electronic means, and it would prohibit increases in property valuations on appeal. And lastly, it would require appraisals to comply with uspap. Section 1 of the bill provides that the director of PVD may remove an appraiser from the list of eligible appraisers after notice and opportunity to be heard in accordance with the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. The governing body of a county is also required to notify the director of PVD when a person no longer holds office of county appraiser. The director then would make a notation on the eligibility list when the person does not complete the 4-year term. Section 2 of the bill would extend the time period when a person may request a full and complete opinion of the Board of Tax Appeals. Currently in statute, it's 14 days, and this would be extended to 21 days. Additionally, BOTA shall serve orders or notice on parties if such person requests and consents to service by electronic means. Sections 3, 5, 6, and 7 of the bill all deal with prohibiting the increase in the valuation of property for taxation purposes, other than the final determination of the appraised value by the county appraiser. So essentially on appeal, if after that final determination has been made, the value cannot be increased on appeal. Then lastly, section 4 would require that appraisers comply with the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, or uspap. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, any question for the revisers? Seeing none, we will move on to the fiscal note again and turn to Department of Revenue if they wish to address anything.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. Senate Bill 119 does have the potential to decrease property tax revenues. However, we do not have data on the property to make a precise estimate at this time. With that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. At this time, we will open up proponent testimony for Senate Bill 119, and welcome to committee Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, again, for indulging us. We're here now. I'm Eric Stafford on behalf of the Kansas Chamber in support of Senate Bill 119. So these bills, I mentioned earlier, a variety of property tax bills that were passed last session by the Senate, and COVID stopped. Several of these were actually scheduled on literally your guys' last day here last year. They were scheduled for a hearing on the House Tax Committee for that Thursday, and I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. They were pulled from the calendar because it became clear you guys were not going to be here longer than necessary. All of these provisions, I've tried to do my best to list in, section 1 of this bill. Last year it was 2020's Senate Bill 264, and give it a little bit of an outline what they do. So the bold italicized font there in our written testimony will help kind of break down the sections of the bill. But all these passed 40-0 last year, as I mentioned. In our view, pretty non-controversial pieces of legislation. The list of eligible appraisers, some of the feedback on the original draft of this felt, well, what if somebody feels like they've been wrongfully terminated from a position as an appraiser, and how can they then, and their names removed from the list, how can they get their job back if that's been their profession and they feel there's a challenge. So that led to some clarifying language for those individuals in the tax committee last year. Bill was amended, and it was the amended version that ultimately passed based on that feedback. So Section 2, time to request full and complete opinion. This is again, this was Senate Bill 262 from last year. Sorry, the microphone's in my path of reading here. It clarifies the timing and of how an aggrieved party may request a full and complete opinion after service of the decision rather than receiving the decision. So it's just clarifying timing. Again, shouldn't, in our view, this would probably be the closest thing to a consent calendar bill that I've ever testified on if it was a standalone bill. Sections 3, 5, 6, and 7, prohibiting BOTA from increasing valuation during an appeal to an amount greater than the initial appeal. So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, there was a representative from the Board of Tax Appeals who spoke before the Senate Tax Committee, and one of the questions that was asked is, does BOTA have the authority to raise valuations higher than what the taxpayer is appealing? So if the taxpayer's house is valued at, or commercial property, say, let's say $10,000, good even number, and the valuation went up to $19,000, and the taxpayer said, no, it should only be 12. BOTA should not have the authority to say it's not 12,000, it's not 19,000, it's 21,000 in our view. So no taxpayer should ever get stuck with a bill higher than what they thought they were appealing, but that has happened in certain circumstances. That representative from BOTA was asked that question. They said, no, we don't have that authority. Well, it's happened in several circumstances. So that's the purpose of that provision there, is to clear that up. Section 4, requiring appraisers to comply with uspap, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraiser Practice. This is where I was getting confused earlier. uspap is the congressionally created, generally recognized ethical and performance standards for the appraisal profession in the United States. uspap was adopted by Congress in 1989 and contains standards for all types of appraisal services. So essentially here, benefit for taxpayers with proposed changes would be ensuring the highest standards of appraisal professionals are the guiding principles by which property in the state is appraised. So this was Senate Bill 297 from 2020's legislative session, and that also passed 40-0 as well. So happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I would also turn your attention to written only proponent testimony on Senate Bill 119. We have some neutral testimony, and is Jay Hall back with us for Kansas Association of Counties?
Actually, Chairman Smith, this is Bruce Cladney, the Executive Director for the KAC, and I would be happy to step in on this one, but I appreciate that.
Okay, go ahead, Bruce. You're the one that we had down. I just didn't know if you'd made that switch yet.
I apologize for that confusion, but I'm back, so yes. So you have in front of you the official neutral testimony that Mr. Hall has submitted to you folks, and we don't have issues with most of the bill. The only piece that I call your attention to is at the bottom, and Mr. Stafford had already discussed this, that by statute, counties do have to make the appraisal no matter what it is, if it's up or down, more or less than what goes into the process. And so based on information that all parties involved bring to the table, determination is made what the value is, and that's the value that has to be assigned. So sometimes that may go up if maybe there's a piece of information that was not known at the time of the appraisal that is made known during the BOTA process, then by statutes that has to become the new appraised value. So I'll be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Do you have an example of something, a situation like that where that's happened?
No, Chairman Smith, I do not personally have an example like that. I would be happy to look into it. Maybe some of the other conferees that come behind me might have something, but I would be certainly happy to look into it and provide any sort of documentation that we might find.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any further questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to make sure that I understand, so if this bill were to pass, that it would not be possible for BOTA to raise the amount being appealed?
That is correct. If this bill passes as is, then that would place an artificial cap over the evaluation, which would probably not be allowed by current statutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, appreciate it.
We also have neutral testimony from David Harper, Director of Division of PVD with KDOR.
Yes, sir. Overall, we're testifying as neutral. There's several provisions of this bill, but we did want to offer some quick support of two provisions that dealt with our operation at the Division of Property Valuation. One is the section that modifies the statute requiring county commissioners to notify us when a person leaves the office of county appraiser and to provide us reason that we can document and share with other counties when they're making hires. I think anything we can do to help support the county commissioners in making good decisions on the hires is critical, and that we support that. And the timing's good. July 1, we'll begin a new 4-year period for appointment of county appraisers. So timing is good for this. And I did just as reference included a map to be the last page of this packet. And I think it was already discussed a little bit, but it kind of thought it might highlight for you some of the challenges some of our counties face. When you hear we have 200 plus appraisers that could be selected from to fill the roles of county appraiser, you think we'd be in good condition. But then when you consider about 70 of the 200, 220, 230 come from 3 counties, this map highlights that some of our more rural counties don't have a lot of applicants to choose from. So as I think Sean mentioned earlier, that even though we have 105 counties, we only have right around 80 individuals serving as county appraisers. So we have numerous appraisers serving multiple counties. I think at some point maybe the counties are going to need to consider appraisal districts, which they can do under current statute. Currently now they all have individual contracts with these appraisers, but going together and forming an appraisal district where they would share cost, share appraisers is certainly an option provided them under current statute. The other bill the provision wanted to offer support on was the one related to adjustment to KSA 79505 on the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. And backing up a bit, after hearing some of the others testify, I should also share that I am a member of IAAO, and I've served on their board. I've also I've chaired the IAAO uspap committee for a number of years. So uspap is something we push very hard in the state of Kansas. I've represented our profession at conversations in Washington, D.C. on uspap with the Appraisal Foundation. And I don't think this bill changes anything, but if it clarifies our reliance on uspap and the requirement to comply with uspap, we're certainly in favor of it. We did attach here a directive that we issue every year. That's the second page, and uspap comes out every 2 years, and every time there's a new edition, we issue this directive, and it clearly states the county or district appraiser shall perform all appraisal functions in conformity with uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. So this is a practice we believe in, and if this language, as I said, helps clarify, we're certainly in favor of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. Committee questions? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the testimony.
Sure.
Is a county commission as a group, are they allowed to get rid of an appraiser? Can they fire an appraiser?
They can, and there is the appeal process the appraiser has, but they need to show failure to perform the duties of their job. Since I've been director, I've been involved in 3 of those where county has either initiated the process, some are resolved before. There was only one that went the full process in that hearing, and the other 2 were resolved prior to that. But the county commissioners, as well as the director of property valuation, have the statutory authority to remove an appraiser from office.
I know of one in which the county had to pay dearly for that decision.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further questions for this conferee? Seeing none, Director, thank you for your testimony. Committee, we also have one opponent testimony, Sean Robertson, Kansas County Appraisers Association.
Kansas County Appraisers Association does support the bulk of the measures in this bill. I won't go into each of them, but we do support the bulk of the bill. The one part of no value increase as a result of or in a hearing we are opposed to, however. For example, if previously unknown information about the property was revealed, then the market value may actually be higher than that value that was appealed. I will say that as a matter of office policy in Saline County, we do not do that. But that is 100% for public relations, and that's it. And I think from speaking with most county appraisers, that is their stance as well. However, a good PR decision doesn't necessarily make good law. You know, because we are to value properties at market value. Another point that I would bring up, and this only happens a couple of times in Saline County a year. We're ballpark the 10th largest county in the state, so we're not one of the bigger ones, but not one of the smaller ones. But a couple of times a year, we have taxpayers who file an appeal to ask that their value be raised because, whether right or wrong, they are under the impression that people look at our values in order to know what they might be willing to pay for the property. As this stands, I think that would be prohibited. Now, I will say, if someone comes in and asks that their value be raised, we certainly do not automatically do that. We value at market value, no matter what. But I also want to address something that I've heard about the part of this bill that from different people, that a taxpayer should not be punished for coming in on an appeal. But I would respond to that by saying I don't see how valuing a property at market value would ever be a punishment to anyone. So with that, I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Sean. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of Senate Bill 119? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 119, and we will move on to our last item of business for the day. It's a hearing on Senate Bill 50. This will be a formality, really. Senate Bill 50 is identical to House Bill 2173 with just a few changes, and the reviser will give us a brief overview on those changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, you're correct. Senate Bill 50 and House Bill 2173 are nearly identical, and this all relates to the Marketplace Facilitator Bill. So they basically started out nearly identical. There's two changes that got made. In Section 1, there was I believe one of the individuals who testified proposed changing the word lodging establishment to hotel as part of her testimony, and that change was made in Senate Bill 50 on the Senate committee side. And then secondarily, in the bill dealing with the collection of the 911 fees, the bill has the collection date going in April 1st of 2022. I believe the original 2173 has it going into effect July 1. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you for that overview. Does Department of Revenue wish to speak to the fiscal note?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, this is Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. Senate Bill 50, we are estimating would increase state revenues by $42.4 million fiscal year 22. Of that total, the state general fund would be estimated to increase by $35.5 million, and in fiscal year 22, the state highway fund would be estimated to increase by $6.9 million. Again, this is kind of what we've used for all of these marketplace facilitator bills. We started with the data that was based upon the GAO study that they had done. We also looked at sales and use tax collections from businesses that are in this market. We reviewed industry data as well as experiences of other states to come up with our estimate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Committee, are there any questions regarding the fiscal note? Seeing none, Kathleen, thank you very much. Most of our testimony today on Senate Bill 50 is written. We do have one verbal proponent for the League of Kansas Municipalities. Deborah Barnes, are you with us? She is. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Deborah Barnes, staff attorney at the League of Kansas Municipalities, and I'm speaking for Trey Cocking, who is giving testimony elsewhere. And as you've already said, you've already heard testimony many times on this bill or other versions. So I would just confine my remarks to saying that our members very much support this bill. They want to see this legislation brought in. It's been nearly 3 years since the Supreme Court made the decision in Wayfair. It's an important issue. It needs to be addressed. Let's hope this will be the year. Please take a look at Trey Cocking's testimony, but I would just leave you with something that he said, because I always think with testimony that it's helpful to have some practical application, some information about that. And Trey has shared with you his own Amazon transactions for 2020 to give an example of how this pans out. And he said that he made 244 transactions in 2020, and 74 of them weren't taxed. That's 30%. And the proportion was pretty much the same in 2019, although I will reveal to you that he made a lot less transactions that year. So I think that gives, that's just one person, but it does give you an idea of what's happening out there. So I would urge you to pass this out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you to Trey. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you once again. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of Senate Bill 50? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 50 and return to the item that I messed up on at the beginning of the meeting, request for introductions. I do have a bill request. It is 21 RS 1841. This is a bill requesting a change to KSA 17-12A601 to remove the annual sweep from the securities fee fund to the state general fund. This is requested on behalf of Representative Patton for Judiciary Committee, on behalf of the Governor's Office and the Attorney General's Office. And please don't ask me any questions because I don't know anything else other than what I just told you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, any objection? This bill will be going to Judiciary Committee. Seeing no objection, the bill request is approved. Committee, are there any other items that need to come before the body?